Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started like any other quiet night. The soft hum of the television filled the room as I curled up on the couch, finally getting a moment to myself. The house was calm and everything felt routine. I was wrapped in my cozy blanket, flipping between channels, not really watching anything in particular. It had been a long week, work had drained me, and all I wanted was to relax and switch off from everything. But that night, something unexpected happened, something I never imagined would change my life forever. I heard the door creak open behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. We've had friends and family over before, and our home was always warm and open. But when I turned my head and saw him standing there, something about the moment felt different. It wasn't just the way he looked at me, it was what I felt deep inside. A kind of unspoken tension that clung to the air, thicker than anything I'd ever experienced. He wasn't supposed to be there, not at that hour and not alone. He was someone I knew, someone familiar, someone close to my husband. That alone should have been enough to keep everything grounded and proper. But the way he walked in, the confidence in his eyes, the slight curve of his lips, it was like he knew something I didn't. Or maybe he just knew exactly what he was doing. I tried to keep things light, offered a casual smile, even asked if he was looking for my husband. He simply shook his head, saying he just stopped by, that he was in the area. He sat down, just a little too close. My heart started beating faster, not out of fear, but confusion. I didn't know what to make of it or how to respond. Was I overthinking it? Was this just friendly banter or something more? The conversation that followed was subtle but charged. Every word had a pause, every look lingered just a second too long. I started to question myself, was this all in my head? Or was he really testing some invisible line neither of us had ever crossed before? There's a strange kind of pull that happens when something forbidden begins to feel real. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And in those whispers, you find yourself wondering, what if? But just when I thought I had control over the moment, just when I convinced myself I knew how this would end, he leaned in slightly and said something I'll never forget. That one sentence turned my world upside down, and I realized then, nothing would be the same after tonight. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have walked away? Or would you have stayed to see what happens next? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever been in a situation that made you question everything, share your story below, I'll be reading them all. Don't forget to vote in the poll. Was it fate or just temptation? The truth is, sometimes the most unimaginable moments come when we least expect them. And this was only the beginning. I sat there, frozen for a second after he said it. His words were soft, yet they hit like a wave, unexpected and powerful. I forced a laugh, trying to keep the moment light, trying to convince myself it was just a joke. But deep down, something inside me stirred. The way he looked at me didn't feel like he was joking. It felt real, too real. He leaned back casually, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just tossed a stone into the calm water of my life. I glanced at the clock. It was late. My husband wouldn't be back for another hour. He had told me he was meeting an old friend for dinner. And now, here I was, sitting beside someone who shouldn't have been there, saying things that should never have been said. His name was Ryan. He had always been around, usually in the background. A colleague of my husband's, someone I saw at gatherings and work events. He was charming in a quiet kind of way, never overstepping, never too bold. But tonight, there was something different in him. Like he had stopped holding back. As we talked, our conversation drifted from casual to personal. He asked how I'd been, if I was truly happy. Simple questions, yet somehow they felt loaded. And the way he listened, really listened, made it hard not to open up. I found myself saying more than I intended. Maybe it was the mood, the comfort of the low lights and soft TV noise, or maybe it was just how he looked at me, like I wasn't invisible. Like someone actually saw me. The truth was, things between me and my husband hadn't been the same for a while. We had fallen into a rhythm: wake up, work, dinner, sleep. Repeat. There was love, yes, but it had grown quiet, more like habit than passion. I never talked about it to anyone. But sitting there, beside Ryan, I felt like someone was finally asking the questions I had buried inside for too long. Still, I reminded myself where the line was. I was married. I had made vows. This moment, whatever it was, had to stay within limits. But the harder I tried to hold that line, the more blurry it became. His eyes would catch mine and hold them just a beat longer than necessary. His words, while careful, carried an undertone that made my heart skip. He wasn't pressuring anything. But he wasn't hiding it either. I asked him again why he really came by. He smiled and said something vague, something about feeling like I might need company tonight. That answer didn't explain much, but somehow it made sense. The strangest part? I didn't ask him to leave. I didn't want to. Outside, the night had grown deeper. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The room felt small, like the air itself had become thick with everything unsaid between us. I looked over at Ryan, and he was already watching me. There was a pause, one that stretched a second too long. And in that moment, I knew something unspoken had already happened between us, something we couldn't undo. What happens when a harmless moment becomes a dangerous temptation? Would you have felt the same if you were in my place? Comment your thoughts and tell me, have you ever felt a connection that wasn't supposed to happen? There's more to this night than you think, and we hadn't even reached the hardest part yet. The clock ticked louder than usual, or maybe it just felt that way. Each second added to the weight in the room. Ryan was still sitting beside me, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence. I tried focusing on the TV screen, pretending to follow the movie playing in front of us, but nothing was sinking in. My mind was everywhere, mostly on what had already been said, and what hadn't been. I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become. Ryan noticed. "You okay?" he asked gently, his voice low and steady. I nodded, but the answer didn't feel honest. I wasn't okay, I was confused. Torn between what I knew was right and the strange pull I felt toward him. It wasn't about attraction in the way people usually talk about it. It was something more complicated. A connection that felt emotional before it felt physical. And maybe that made it even more dangerous. I asked about his life, about work, about relationships, trying to bring us back to safer ground. He spoke openly, saying he hadn't been serious with anyone in a while. He looked down for a moment before adding, "Sometimes it's hard to open up to people, until you find the one person who makes it easy." I swallowed hard. I didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't just saying it, he meant it. And I didn't want to admit it, but I felt the same. That was the conflict no one talks about. It's not always black and white, good versus bad. Sometimes it's a slow fade of something missing at home, and the sudden discovery of something unexpected with someone else. I loved my husband. He was kind, responsible, and had never given me a reason not to trust him. But somewhere along the way, we stopped really seeing each other. And now, someone else was seeing me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. The sound of thunder outside broke the silence. Ryan looked at me again, and this time his expression had shifted. There was something in his eyes, like he wanted to say more but was holding back. "You ever think about how one night can change everything?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I was scared of the answer. Not because I didn't know it, but because I did. He stood up, slowly, and walked toward the window. His back was to me now, and I could breathe again, if only for a second. But the air still felt heavy. I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. As much as I tried to stay grounded, my thoughts kept slipping, imagining what would happen if I leaned into the feeling instead of resisting it. Would it ruin everything? Or had something already changed that couldn't be undone? This wasn't just about attraction or curiosity anymore. It was about choices. About moments you don't plan but end up shaping everything that comes after. If you were in my shoes, would you have asked him to leave? Or would you let the night unfold? Comment below your thoughts. What do you think is going to happen next? What would you do if you felt seen by someone who wasn't supposed to matter? There's more to the story, and the most complicated part is yet to come. The rain outside had started to pour harder, tapping steadily against the windows like a warning. The soft glow of the TV was the only light in the room now, casting shadows that made everything feel even more intimate. Ryan was still standing by the window, silent, like he was waiting for me to say something. I sat still, my heart beating faster than it should have. The tension between us had grown unbearable, thick with everything we hadn't said, every feeling we had been quietly hiding behind casual words and half-hearted smiles. He finally turned around, slowly, and walked back toward the couch, but this time he didn't sit. He stood just a few feet away from me, his eyes locked onto mine. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "I just needed to be here tonight, with you." I felt something shift inside me, something I didn't want to name. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I was afraid of what I felt, afraid of what this night was turning into. My marriage had always felt safe, predictable. But now, that safety felt like a distant memory, replaced by something that made me question everything. The air between us was charged. He wasn't touching me, he hadn't crossed any physical line, but emotionally, we were already far past where we should be. And that realization made my hands tremble. I stood up too, needing space, needing to breathe. I walked toward the kitchen, but he followed, quietly, not demanding anything, just being there. "I've felt this for a while," he finally said. "But I never planned on saying anything. I know this is complicated. I know it's wrong, but sometimes something just feels right, even when it shouldn't." His honesty hit me like a wave. It was the first time someone had said out loud what I had been struggling with inside. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my fingers gripping the edge. I didn't know if I wanted to cry or scream or just run. All I knew was that I couldn't ignore it anymore. A silence hung between us, heavier than before. The kind that begs to be broken but dares you to speak. And then, there was a knock at the door. It was late. Too late for visitors. We both froze, eyes meeting in alarm. Was it my husband? Was it someone else? And if it was, what would they walk into? What do you think was on the other side of that door? Drop your guesses in the comments. The most intense part of the story is just seconds away, and everything is about to change. I stared at the door, heart pounding so loud I was sure Ryan could hear it. The knock echoed again, firmer this time. He looked at me, brows raised slightly, silently asking what to do. I motioned for him to stay quiet, then took a slow step toward the entrance. My fingers hesitated on the doorknob. Every worst-case scenario ran through my head in a flash. If it was my husband, how would I explain Ryan being here at this hour? Why would he even believe me? The line between harmless and questionable had already blurred too much. When I finally opened the door, it wasn't my husband. It was my sister, drenched from the rain, her expression full of panic. "You need to come with me." "Now," she said, her voice shaky. "It's about Mark. That's my husband." My throat went dry. What happened? She looked past me and saw Ryan standing in the living room. Her eyes narrowed, just for a second, but she didn't say a word about him. "We'll talk in the car. Please, just hurry." I turned back to Ryan. There were so many unspoken things hanging between us, but I couldn't deal with them now. "I have to go," I said quietly. He nodded, but his face looked different, concerned, but also like he knew this night had taken a turn none of us were ready for. In the car, my sister explained. Mark had been in an accident, not life-threatening, but serious enough to land him in the ER. He had been driving back from dinner when another vehicle ran a red light. Just like that, everything I thought I had time to figure out suddenly felt urgent. Sitting beside his hospital bed a half-hour later, I looked at him, bruised, quiet, but alive, and guilt settled into my chest like a stone. I held his hand and felt how familiar it was, how safe, how distant. I couldn't stop thinking about how I had been with someone else emotionally while he was fighting for his life. The timing felt cruel, like life was forcing me to face a truth I had been avoiding. The next day, Ryan texted. "Is he okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Yes. He's resting. I'll talk to you soon." But even as I sent it, I knew soon wasn't clear anymore. Nothing was. What made things worse, or more complicated, was what I discovered when I returned home later that night. On the kitchen counter was Mark's phone, forgotten in the rush to the hospital. I wasn't planning to check it, but something made me. And what I found shook me, a long string of late-night messages between him and someone I didn't recognize, a woman. The tone, the timing, it didn't look innocent. That's when everything twisted again. Had I been emotionally slipping away while he had already gone somewhere else entirely? Now, the question wasn't just how far had I gone, it was how far had he? What would you do if you found out your partner may have betrayed you just as you were questioning your own loyalty? Tell me in the comments, is this all coincidence, or is something deeper unraveling beneath the surface? Because now, everything feels like it's spiraling, and the truth may hurt more than the lies. I stood there, holding Mark's phone, my hands cold and shaking. I read through the messages again, just to be sure I wasn't misreading things. But no, the words were clear. Flirty, suggestive, late-night check-ins. The name saved was just L. That name didn't belong to anyone I knew. And the last message? Can't wait to see you again. Tonight was perfect. Sent just hours before his accident. My chest tightened. So while I had been sitting in my own storm of guilt and confusion, Mark had already stepped out of our marriage. I sat down, overwhelmed, trying to piece together how long this had been going on and why he had never said a word. We had been distant, yes, but this was betrayal. Quiet. Hidden. And worse, maybe deliberate. The next morning, I visited him at the hospital again. He looked tired, pale, but awake. I didn't bring up the messages right away. I just watched him. Listened to him talk about the accident, how scared he had been. For a moment, I almost felt that old care again. That pull to protect him. But something inside me had shifted. The illusion had broken. Later that evening, I confronted him. I asked directly, "Who's L?" His face changed instantly. Not surprised, just defeated. "It's not what you think," he said quietly, but I didn't let him finish. "Don't lie, Mark. Please, not this time." He looked down, silent, then nodded. "It started months ago. I didn't mean for it to. I felt like we were strangers. I thought maybe you didn't care anymore." That hit deep. Because I had felt the same. Only, instead of stepping out, I had stayed until Ryan. When I got home, I finally called Ryan. Told him everything. The accident. The messages. The confrontation. I didn't know what I expected from him. Support? Clarity? Instead, there was a long pause. Then he said something I never saw coming. "I need to tell you something too. I knew about Mark. A while ago. That's why I came over that night." I froze. "What do you mean?" "I saw him once, with her. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. But when I saw how lost you were, I just couldn't stay silent." And just like that, the story twisted again. So while I thought I had been standing at the edge of a mistake, maybe I had been walking toward a truth someone else had already uncovered. Would you call that betrayal or fate? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Because some endings don't feel like endings at all, just the beginning of something else entirely. The silence after Ryan's confession was heavier than anything that had come before. It explained so much, yet opened a door to a different kind of pain. He had known about Mark, about the cheating, about the cracks in my marriage long before I did. And instead of telling me, he stayed close, watching it unfold. Maybe he was protecting me, or maybe part of him had been waiting for the moment I'd look at him differently. Either way, he had carried that truth alone, and now we were both standing in the fallout of secrets we hadn't asked for. I didn't say much that night. I just thanked him quietly and ended the call. I needed time, not to process what had happened, but to figure out what came next. The house felt strange now. Every room reminded me of something, a moment of love, a broken promise, an unanswered question. But in the quiet, I realized something important. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was just done. The next morning, I told Mark I needed space. I didn't raise my voice, didn't cry. I just said what I felt. We've both been somewhere else for a while now. And maybe it's time we stop pretending we're still in the same place. He nodded. No arguments. No tears. Just two people who had finally run out of reasons to keep holding on. Over the next few weeks, I started rebuilding. Not around Ryan, and not around Mark, but around myself. I needed to learn who I was outside of the roles I had been playing. Wife. Caregiver. The one who always stayed. Ryan reached out again, gently, with no pressure. We met for coffee, talked like two people who had nothing to prove. He didn't ask for anything. He just listened. And for once, that was enough. Maybe one day, there could be more. Maybe not. But for now, we were both honest, and that felt like a better start than any fairy tale ending. Sometimes love doesn't look like you expected. Sometimes it breaks you open just to show you what you've been missing, not in someone else, but in yourself. And if you're lucky, it brings you back stronger. So tell me, how did you feel about the way it all ended? Would you give someone like Ryan a second chance? Or would you choose a new beginning alone? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you'd like to see where this story could go next. Because sometimes, endings are just the quiet beginning of something more. Summary: a married woman's quiet evening takes an unexpected turn when someone close to her husband walks in with a hidden truth. What begins as innocent conversation slowly unravels secrets, betrayal, and emotional temptation that force her to question her marriage and herself. With every twist, the romantic suspense deepens, leading to a climax where nothing is as it seems. Will she choose loyalty or finally put herself first? 15.